Join us as we turn an IKEA nightstand into a Disney Frozen themed dollhouse, complete with 2 floors and 2 doors. We used most of the pieces that came with the original IKEA purchase. However, we added this bottom piece here to add the feet to make it a little taller. Instead of the door that came with the purchase, we cut a 3/4 inch piece of plywood to fit the hole so that it would cover the top and bottom floors. Our inspiration comes from At Home with Ashley, who took this IKEA nightstand and revamped it, giving it a whole dollhouse aesthetic. It's very cute. We took this idea and gave it a frozen theme and turned it into a townhouse. We took a lot of the same approach that Ashley did, so definitely check out her page if you're interested in making one of these for yourselves. We also used a cardboard cutout to make the template for the front, which was really helpful in cutting the plywood so that it would be the right size and shape. However, we did not put the whole IKEA nightstand together before painting it because I was individually painting the pieces. But if you're going to use wallpaper or just paint the inside, you could definitely put it together first. I'm including her link in the description below so you can check it out for yourself. I further got my inspiration from watching Frozen about a million times. I wanted to capture the Nordic inspiration and the little motifs that are throughout the whole movie. To make painting these easier, I turned them into stencils using the Cricut. If you have a Cricut, I have the link to the file below. The stencils aren't perfect, but they do really help in giving you an idea of where things need to go and the sizing. I used wood filler around the insides of the windows and the doors once they were cut out and then started painting. I then needed to sketch out the whole design so I could figure out what it was going to look like and the sizing for everything. After going through and painstakingly using rulers to sketch everything out, I then proceeded to paint over all of the lines. It had to be done. Starting with the library, I did a base coat as the back of the bookshelves and then painted over white so that I could have the books stand out. I don't know that this was necessary in the end with some of the paint I was using. We then carved out stamps of the elemental motifs that are in Frozen 2 for Elsa's bedroom for her rug, as the floor upstairs is divided into Elsa and Anna's rooms. For the bedrooms, for Anna's bedroom and Elsa's bedroom, I did a base layer of yellow paint on the back and then used pencil to transfer the stencils that we cut out on the Cricut onto the board so that I could hand paint them instead of trying to go through the stencil material. The upstairs has the colors as closely matched as I could to what is in the movie, keeping it fun and colorful. So the upstairs is just for the girls, while the downstairs has the library with some darker, more mature colors with some fun pops of color on the books as well. Pulling in more elements from the movie, here's a little snowflake design that's at the bottom of the bookshelf that I really love this bright color for. After taping off and painting the vertical and horizontal rows of the bookshelves, it was very satisfying to pull the tape off. I am unreasonably pleased with how well the fireplace turned out. I ended up using some colored pencil around the stonework in the bottom, but the rest of it is all acrylic paint. I even used house paint samples that I got from Home Depot. As this is a gift from my goddaughter, after painting it, I added the time of her birth into the clock as a memento to her. If you wanted to keep this more true to the movie, paint all the books gray and green, but I thought more fun colors would be great for kids. So these are the two side panels, the left wall and the right wall. And this is the fireplace that's going to be on the right side of the dollhouse. And this is the floor that's upstairs with Elsa's room, which is the pink, and then Anna's room, which is the stripes. We then took all the pieces outside and applied a layer of semi-gloss polyurethane. This should protect it and help it last longer since children will be playing with it. Once all of the pieces cured, they were dry, and it was time to assemble the IKEA nightstand. We followed the instructions per the manual for the most part. It wasn't until later in the process that we needed to make some adjustments based on the fact that we weren't using the original door, and we had some other minor changes with the feet. We also were not using the hinges that came with the original IKEA furniture. We debated using soft close hinges since this would be for children and it might help prevent any door slamming, but we worried about little fingers and other toys getting stuck in those, so we went with these 1.5 inch black ones. Since we replaced the door with a 3/4 inch piece of plywood, the shelf was not going to fit anymore. So we ended up cutting the shelf in the beginning before painting it, and now my husband has a challenge of how to fit in the shelf and where to put the new holes. We filled the holes that came in the furniture with wood filler and painted over them, and so now we needed to drill new holes so that it would be balanced and not wobble. Before putting the pieces together, we lightly sanded the IKEA furniture, then used a layer of primer before putting on the paint design, and then the layer of semi-gloss on top of that made it a little thicker so that there really wasn't any wobble once we put in the shelf. We drilled new holes for the shelf so that it would fit in the same place, but just slightly above where the original pegs were supposed to go. Pounding that into place, we then took out the shelf so that we could admire the design one more time. And then we just had to put in these pegs in the back to keep it from shifting around, and it was assembled. Since we didn't put it together prior to painting it, I had to guess on where some of the lines would meet up. I think I did a pretty good job, but I didn't know where the base of the grandfather clock would be. So I added in a bottom there so it looks like it's sitting on the floor. I then transitioned the pink into the blue in the wrong direction, but that is what it is. Back to the Cricut, I decided that it would be good to have some texture and cut out the wood frame on the front door to the castle. I sketched out what I wanted the front door to look like based on images that I found in the movie and used that as my template and inserted it into the Cricut to make the shape and outline. I then had it cut it out onto the basswood, but the Cricut did not like this. Cricut tried to take the Frozen theme a little too far by freezing mid-cut. It completely stopped cutting, and I think that's because the lines weren't straight. They were curved and in a weird angle because the wood wasn't cut out perfectly straight. After attempting twice to have the Cricut cut out the design, I took what it gave me and taped the back of it so that the pieces would stay together and be a little stronger. And then I used a blade to cut in the lines so that they would go all the way through because they weren't going all the way through, and I think that was part of the problem. The basswood is so thin that it's so fragile when I took the pieces out from the inside. So the second time I cut this, I left them in there and then patched some of the holes where it cracked with wood filler and then sanded it smooth so that there was no rough edges. Since I used wood filler, I had to paint it, and then I checked that it fit into the door frame, which thankfully it does. We then chiseled out a little space for the hinges and attached those to the door first and then later to the dollhouse door. Ta-da! All right, so now it's time to paint the front door. And the front door of the dollhouse is mimicking the front of Arendelle Castle. Originally, I had covered the entire door in this light blue color, and then I sketched out the design of what I wanted it to look like so that it mimics the opening with a little bit of the guard's gate and the wall at the bottom, and then the distant castle at the top. There are about 7 layers of paint in the end, including the primer and the background moonglass color, then with each of the bricks. And I think every layer is really necessary to get the final depth and color and just intensity that you get with the layers. This was my first time painting brick like this, and after watching several tutorials online, what I took away is that you want to have lighter colors around the top and then darker colors around the bottom, as if like the sun was coming in from the sky, shining down on the bricks, the stones, and then there would be darker grout around the bottom. And so I took that approach and had the darker half kind of being the same on all of the bricks. It was just easier to be repetitive, and I think it looks nice in the end. So keeping a lighter color around the top, and here you can see I'm adding the dark around the bottom and the right side. So the sun is clearly coming in from the top left and making the darker on the bottom and the right. So long as you're consistent, I think you could do a light grout or dark grout, just keeping it consistent and contrasting to the actual bricks or stones. I used a sponge several times throughout to add more texture and lighter color. So to lighten it up, I use one of the lighter blues mixed with white, and instead of having just like pure white, and I sponged that on occasionally. And then I went over to try to add some more light around the tops of the stones, and then added more of the lighter blue sponge color. Since the bottom half is closer to the audience, I wanted it to be a little bit darker and not quite this icy blue of the castle behind it. Just off camera, my husband is cringing as I'm adding an entire layer of green to all of the bricks. But I did this in part because it was really hard to see the bricks after I did the layer of tan over the sketch, and partially because I wanted to pull out some of the mossy tones that I'm going to add later. Depending on what colors you want to pull out and the vibe you're going for, I think you could do red or green here for very different aesthetics. But then I took the similar approach to the stones above. The sun is still coming from the same direction, so I did a layer of brown around the bottom and then filled it in with some lighter tan coming up from it to make it a little lighter and blend those colors. And then you'll see that I add in more grays and mix the browns and the grays to cover the green. You can still see the green, but your eye's not recognizing it as green. It's just recognizing it as part of gray and stone and general age of castle. It might not seem important to do each of the layers, but honestly, it didn't take that long and it was a good time. And I think it is really key to add that depth and the character to the castle, to see all of the different colors as they blend together. I added a layer of brick around the door and the columns, and then added some moss to the corners. I then painted the roof brown and added some speckled with the sponge and filled in the gate tower here. In addition to the guard tower, I added just a little bit of vines crawling up the columns on either side of the door. At the top of the columns, I took the snowflake from the library motif and added it at the top with colored pencil. This is a snapshot of the front of Arendelle Castle. Keeping that in mind, this is what we came up with: a blend of castle and townhouse. There's a stained glass window with a flower that's common throughout the entire movie, and I thought it would be really neat if we could make a stained glass window and put it in the dollhouse here. However, due to safety concerns with the glass potentially breaking, we went with plexiglass as it's more durable and more likely to bend than to break. We then trimmed each of the points so that they'd be shorter and not stick out as far, but not so short that we couldn't still bend them to make sure that the glass sat level in each of the frames. We could still add some stained glass cling or paint the glass if we wanted to give it that stained glass look. Once they were level, we left about 1/4 inch around each of the pieces of glass, taping them off so that we could caulk them into place, and then screwed the door handle on. We used a dowel with some wood glue to fill in the hole on this foot. The screw had stripped out, and so we needed to replace it. And then we just re-drilled the hole and we were able to screw it on. We covered them with a layer of poly as well before screwing them on. As this is a gift, we wanted to leave a little message for the girls and hope that they will know that we made this with love just for them as a custom piece. The letter punches that we're using are actually meant for leather or some other cloth or metal, but they work just fine for this. But now we're all done. It's complete and put together and ready to be played with. I found these little chairs when Joann's was going out of business and painted the same designs that are on the fireplace and Elsa's room. Some twinkle lights or some big candles would be great in here to lighten up the room and add some more ambiance. Although this furniture is originally a nightstand, we really wanted it to capture the essence of a dollhouse. But it can still function as a nightstand. There's plenty of room in here to put books and little trinkets, and the top is clean so that you can put a cup of water or snacks. There's a lot of potential to add mirrors or rugs and other little decorations and toys. Don't tell the girls, but I'm planning on making some dolls to go with the dollhouse. But for now, let their imaginations run wild as they plan adventures for sisters Elsa and Anna and their little Arendelle castle.